The static had been there for weeks, white noise on every channel, every frequency. Silence had become the new soundtrack of the world. Radios were just relics of the old life now, like coffee shops, school bells, and crowded sidewalks. But on the 42nd day since the fall, a sound broke through. A faint voice, trembling through the static. "Alive, Northeast Grid, help." Mason Reeves sat frozen beside the old military transceiver, his hands still hovering over the dial. He hadn't heard a voice that wasn't trying to eat him in weeks. The bunker beneath the collapsed museum was quiet. A single solar lantern buzzed overhead, flickering slightly. A soft wind echoed above them through broken vents. But that voice was real. He leaned in, twisting the dial slightly. "Say again." "This is Mason Reeves, survivor out of Sector 4. Repeat your message." "Nothing. Just more static." His heart pounded as he adjusted the volume. Still nothing. Behind him, footsteps shuffled over concrete. Nora appeared, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. "You okay?" she asked, glancing at the radio. "I heard something." A voice said something about being alive, Northeast Grid. Her eyes widened. "There hasn't been a signal in a month." "I know." They had both given up on the radios. Everyone had. The power grid was gone. Satellites were dead. The world had sunk into a primitive, paranoid quiet. Anyone out there broadcasting was either insane, or desperate. Mason ran his fingers through his scruffy hair. It didn't sound recorded. It sounded recent. Panicked. Nora leaned over and adjusted the receiver's antenna. Maybe it was a glitch. Old loop, caught in feedback. "I don't think so." He turned to her, eyes burning with a mix of dread and hope. "What if someone is still out there?" She said nothing. Hope was dangerous. Hope made you take risks. Hope got people killed. Down the hall, little Sammy stirred in his sleep. His stuffed bear poked out from the bundle of blankets that passed as his bed. If there was even a sliver of a chance someone out there had supplies, medicine, or sanctuary, they couldn't ignore it. "We need to try and trace it," Mason said. Nora gave a short, breathless laugh. "Trace a ghost signal with what?" "We've got a fried map, no working drone, and barely enough batteries to last a week." "I don't care. I'm not staying here waiting to rot." Silence fell between them. Nora finally nodded, slowly. "We'll take shifts. Keep the radio on. If it repeats, we log it. If we catch coordinates, we move." 2 days passed with nothing. The signal never returned. Nora grew colder, convinced it was a fluke. Mason, on the other hand, stared at the radio like it was a doorway to salvation. And on the third night, it happened again. "Alive, Gritty 7, please, supplies low." Nora and Mason bolted upright. Sammy stirred again in the corner. Mason jotted it down. "Gritty 7. That's the old refinery district. Northeast. Close to the old weather station." "Dead zone," Nora muttered. "Every scouting party we sent that way vanished." "Exactly. That's why they'd be hiding there. No one hides in the middle of that death trap. Unless they don't have a choice." The decision weighed on them. Leave the safety of their hidden bunker and trek through infected zones on the mere possibility of a survivor sending out a weak, dying signal? "3 of us," Mason said. "Me, you, and Sammy." "No. He's not safe here alone. If anyone finds this place while we're gone, he's done for." Nora's eyes flicked to the sleeping boy. He was only 6. Too young to remember what the world was like before the fall. All he knew were hiding spots, ration packs, and whispered warnings to stay quiet. "If we go," she said slowly, "we prep like we'll never come back. 1 bag each. 2 days of food. We go quiet, we go fast, and we don't stop for anything." Mason nodded. "We leave at dawn. The sky was pale with ashen streaks of rust-colored clouds as they surfaced. The city looked like a corpse. Steel bones of fallen skyscrapers reached into the sky like snapped fingers. Roads were cracked open, covered in black vines and broken glass. They moved in silence, through alleys and over rooftops. No signs of life, human or undead. But that never meant they were alone. Halfway to the grid, they found the first message. A painted wall, sprayed in bold red. "We are here. We are fighting. Find the light." Underneath it, a crude arrow pointing deeper into the ruins. Mason stared at it, heart racing. They're real. Nora swallowed hard. Or it's bait. He looked toward the horizon, where the refinery district loomed in gray shadow. Either way, they were going to find out. The city's bones groaned in the wind. Rusted street signs swung like nooses above crumbled intersections. Windows, long shattered, gaped like the hollow sockets of a skull. And in the center of it all, Mason, Nora, and little Sammy crept through the wreckage of what used to be a bustling downtown. They had left the safety of the bunker behind at dawn. Now, with the sun bleeding into the horizon behind them, they entered the silent zone, an area that survivors whispered about but rarely braved. Not because of what they saw, but because of what they didn't. No birds. No rats. No moaning undead. Just silence. "This place feels wrong," Nora muttered, her voice barely above a breath. Mason nodded. He felt it too. Every instinct screamed that something had hollowed this place out. He scanned the shadows between buildings, finger resting just beside the trigger of his battered rifle. Sammy clutched his hand tightly, his eyes darting nervously beneath his hood. They followed the red arrow they'd seen painted on the wall, leading them deeper into a maze of alleys. Every few blocks, they found another message, always scrawled in the same hurried paint. "Keep going. You're not alone. Light ahead." It was eerie. Whoever left the messages had done so recently, some paint still glistened faintly. And always pointing east, toward the refinery district, Gritty 7. They passed a flipped delivery truck with vines crawling through its shattered windshield. A toppled billboard advertised a Family First Survival Expo, June 2023. Nora scoffed under her breath. Funny. World ended in July. Mason smiled grimly. Bad timing. As the day faded, they found an abandoned bookstore. The front door had been barricaded from the inside, but someone, or something, had forced it open. Books were scattered everywhere, pages torn and yellowed, their words now meaningless in this dead world. "Rest here," Mason said. Inside, they cleared a spot and blocked the broken entrance with a table. Sammy curled up on a blanket, exhausted. Nora sat beside a dusty bookshelf, inspecting her machete's edge. "You still think that signal was real?" she asked. "Yes," Mason said without hesitation. "And the signs, someone's been trying to lead survivors in. You saw them. Or someone's luring us in." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a folded paper, an old, marked-up map of the city. The Gritty 7 sector was circled in red. Handwritten notes surrounded it: refinery, collapsed substation, last known military supply depot. There was a radio tower nearby, he said. If anyone had access to emergency systems, they could have used it to boost a signal. Nora studied the map. Too much open ground between here and there. And no cover once we hit the flats. Mason looked at her. We don't have a choice. That message was real. And if someone out there is holding on, like we are, we need to find them. She didn't argue. They left the next morning before dawn. Fog rolled in, low and thick, blanketing the streets like the breath of the dead. Visibility was barely 10 feet. They moved quietly, past burned-out patrol cars and skeletons wrapped in shredded hazmat suits. At the edge of the silent zone, the fog parted just enough for them to see the outer fence of the old refinery district, a mile-wide sprawl of rusting towers, pipelines, and machinery that looked like a mechanical graveyard. It was quiet. Too quiet. Stay close, Mason whispered, tightening his grip on Sammy's hand. They crossed the broken fence, stepping into the heart of Gritty 7. Inside, the air was thick with an oily stink. Pools of dark sludge reflected the sky. The walkways between storage tanks creaked under their weight. Then, they saw it. A light. Faint, flickering from inside the main control building, 50 yards ahead. Nora raised her machete. That's either salvation, or death. They approached slowly. A door had been left ajar, swaying slightly. Someone had cleared a path through the debris. Inside, the flickering came from a small camp lantern sitting on a crate. Next to it, an old military radio, humming softly. No one else was there. Mason stepped forward and grabbed the microphone. This is Mason Reeves. We received your signal. If you're still alive, we're here. Please respond. Static. Then. Click. A different voice crackled through, calm but urgent. Don't trust the lights. They listen when you move. If you made it this far, hide. They know you're here now. Then silence. Mason looked up at Nora. Her face had gone pale. A sound echoed through the refinery. Slow. Heavy. Like something massive dragging itself across metal. From the shadows outside the window, shapes began to move, taller than a man, shambling slow, but not quite zombies. Not human either. Sammy whimpered. Mason pulled him close. Get down. Stay silent. Whatever was hunting in the silent zone. It wasn't dead. Not entirely. The refinery groaned again, steel against steel, wind through rusted pipes, but this time, the sound wasn't alone. Thuds. Scrapes. Not the uneven shuffle of a typical undead horde, but heavier, rhythmic. Like something half machine, half meat was waking up beneath their feet. Mason crouched by the window, his eyes locked on the shadows outside. The shapes were still too far to make out clearly, but they were wrong, too tall, too smooth, like their limbs had been broken and reassembled with metal rods and wires. One of them stopped and tilted its head unnaturally, as if sniffing the air. They're not normal, Nora whispered. Sammy clutched her side, eyes wide with unspoken fear. Mason's grip tightened on his rifle. We need to move. Now. They ducked into a narrow maintenance tunnel beneath the control room, the echo of the distorted creatures following behind them. The narrow passage reeked of fuel and mildew. Water dripped from overhead pipes, and their footsteps splashed in ankle-deep sludge. It twisted like a maze, barely wide enough for them to crawl in parts. Sammy whispered, "What were those?" "I don't know," Mason muttered. "They're not like anything I've seen since the fall." "They didn't move like zombies," Nora added. "Too quiet. Too focused. Someone's doing something here. Experimenting, maybe." They reached a maintenance hatch, rusted and half-buried behind an old control panel. With effort, Mason forced it open. Cold air rushed in, outside. A back service yard lay beyond, ringed with chain-link fences. A small generator shed stood nearby, light flickering through its cracked door. Mason peeked through the slats. The refinery yard was empty, for now. They made a run for the shed. Inside, the air buzzed with low static. An old power monitor blinked red. Next to it, a whiteboard covered in scribbles, strange frequency codes, survival notes, a hand-drawn map of the refinery. At the center of it all, coordinates. Marked in thick black ink, Echo Point, last safe node. Nora traced her finger over the name. Echo Point. You ever hear of that? Mason shook his head. Not on any of our maps. Below it, a phrase chilled them more than the creatures outside. Signal linked. Source moved. We are not alone in the frequency anymore. The radio crackled again. This time, it was a whisper. Not a voice, but breathing. Mason slammed it off. We're being watched. Before Nora could respond, the building trembled. A metallic crash rang out outside. The fence had been torn down. The creatures were here. Mason grabbed Sammy and pushed him into the far corner of the shed. Stay low. Don't move unless I say. Nora checked the back door. There's a drainage ditch. We can crawl through. The moment they exited, the refinery yard lit up in unnatural light, blue flashes, like electricity sparking between the towers. The creatures moved in the flashes, jerking and fast, like they only came alive when the pulses surged. They're reacting to the energy. Nora hissed. The trio dove into the drainage ditch and slid under the fence. The cold metal scraped their skin, but they didn't stop. Behind them, the inhuman things stalked the compound, sniffing out the signal source like trained bloodhounds. Once they were back in the streets, the fog swallowed them again. They didn't speak for blocks, only moved, fast and quiet, through alleyways and empty warehouses. Every so often, they paused to listen. No pursuit. They finally collapsed in the skeleton of a train station, hidden under twisted steel beams. Sammy was shaking from exhaustion. Mason wrapped a blanket around him. What the hell are we dealing with? Nora whispered. Mason studied the map he had snatched from the shed. Echo Point was marked far east, just beyond the forest line. An old utility substation used to sit out there, forgotten by most. If someone had reactivated it, they could power a signal tower. Something's changed, he said quietly. The undead used to be instinct. Now they're being guided. Watched. Tracked. By who? I don't know. But if there's a real Echo Point out there, we need to find it. Before they do. Nora's eyes narrowed. And if it's a trap? Then at least we'll finally know who's been listening. That night, Mason took first watch. The city lay still outside, dead and quiet. But his mind raced. The signal, the strange creatures, the breathing on the radio, it all felt connected. Someone was trying to lead survivors to something. But was it hope? Or a cage? The wind picked up, rattling loose shutters in the distance. Sammy stirred and mumbled in his sleep. Nora shifted, blade clutched tightly to her chest. Mason sat in silence, eyes fixed on the horizon, toward Echo Point. Whatever was waiting out there, they were going to face it. Together. The forest east of the city wasn't green anymore. Ash coated every branch, and the trees stood like silent ghosts, blackened trunks stretching into a gray sky. Once, this was a national park, a place families came to hike, laugh, live. Now, it was the only path left to a place that wasn't even supposed to exist. Echo Point. Mason adjusted the straps on Sammy's backpack. The boy hadn't complained once during the journey, though his legs trembled with every step. Nora walked a few feet ahead, machete drawn, scanning the brush. Every crackle of twigs underfoot made them pause. The memory of the creatures in the refinery haunted each step. They had been traveling since dawn. According to the stolen map, Echo Point was no more than 2 miles away, hidden beyond the power lines that cut through the eastern ridgeline. The closer they got, the more unnatural the air felt. No birds. No wind. No rot. Just silence. Too much silence. Smell that? Nora whispered. Mason paused. A sharp scent, ozone. Like a storm had passed through, even though the sky was clear. They reached the top of a ridge and crouched low. Below, nestled in a gully, stood the remains of a concrete utility bunker. Solar panels, freshly cleaned, lined the hillside nearby, tilted toward the weak sun. A signal tower rose behind the bunker, half repaired with scavenged metal, antenna reaching skyward. And then they saw them. People. 4 of them. Armed. Alert. Human. Real. One of them glanced up at the ridge. Mason ducked. They've got a lookout. That means they're organized, Nora said. Maybe even military. Or worse, Mason replied. Still, they had come too far to turn back. And someone had sent that signal. If Echo Point was a trap, it was better to spring it head-on than keep running blind through the ruins. Mason waved a piece of white fabric above the ridge, slow and deliberate. A signal of peace. No gunshots followed. A voice echoed from below. "Drop your weapons and come down slow." Mason glanced at Nora, then placed his rifle on the ground. Nora hesitated before doing the same. Sammy clung to his father's coat. They stepped out. The armed group met them halfway. Their leader, a woman in her 50s with streaks of gray in her tied-back hair, looked Mason over carefully. "You're the first to make it here in 2 weeks," she said. "Where'd you get the signal?" "We picked it up near the refinery," Mason replied. "Your voice?" The woman nodded. "I'm Captain Lennox. We've been broadcasting to see if anyone was still alive." Guess it worked. Inside the bunker, everything felt different, clean, powered, controlled. Walls were lined with repurposed tech, computers running off solar batteries, radios tuned to multiple frequencies, even a water filtration system humming softly in the corner. Survivors in patched uniforms moved through the corridors like they had purpose. For the first time in months, Mason felt like he had stepped back into the old world. Sammy stared in awe at the lights. "Are we safe now?" he whispered. Mason didn't know how to answer. Captain Lennox led them into a small operations room. A satellite map was pinned to the wall. Red zones marked hot spots, areas overrun by undead. But others, marked in yellow, were something else entirely. "What are these?" Nora asked. Lennox tapped one of the yellow marks near the refinery. "Hive clusters." "Hives?" Mason echoed. "They're not just mindless anymore," Lennox said. "The ones you saw, the tall ones? We call them listeners. Something's changing them. Something old, maybe dormant, is waking up inside the infected. They're starting to coordinate. Not everywhere, just in the zones closest to dead military sites. Like Sector 4, Mason realized. Lennox nodded. We've been tracking movement patterns. Radioactivity. We think someone, or something, is controlling part of the swarm. Not all, but enough to start turning the apocalypse into a war. And you're fighting it, from here? Nora asked. This isn't the fight, Lennox said. This is just the warning. She turned toward a console. A low-frequency hum began playing. It was the same voice they'd heard on the radio. A repeat. Alive, Gritty 7, please. That's you, Mason whispered. No, Lennox said, staring at the console grimly. That's not me anymore. We stopped broadcasting 5 days ago. Mason's blood went cold. Then who's been sending the message? Someone rerouted our signal. Hijacked it. To lead people in, Nora murmured. Lennox nodded. You were bait. That night, Mason lay awake in the sleeping quarters they'd been given. Outside the bunker, guards paced, weapons at the ready. Inside, the light hummed softly, too calm for a world so broken. He stared at the ceiling. They had reached Echo Point. But someone else knew they would. Someone was watching. And worse. They were listening. The radio crackled again, soft, almost unnoticed beneath the quiet hum of Echo Point's command room. Mason stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching the console like it might start bleeding. Captain Lennox and Nora were already at the table, going over recent recon logs, but Mason couldn't focus. The same haunting voice had returned. Alive, Gritty 7, help. It was identical in tone, pacing, even the static. A perfect repeat. Play it again, Mason said. Lennox tapped a key. The clip looped. Alive, Gritty 7, help. Nora turned toward him. It's a recording, Mason. Same distortion. Same frequency. You're chasing a ghost. No, Mason replied. It's more than that. It followed us. From the refinery. It knew when we arrived. Lennox frowned. It shouldn't be able to rebroadcast from that range. Not without a nearby signal booster. Mason looked up. Then someone out there is amplifying it. Maybe in the forest. That idea sent a cold weight down Nora's spine. The woods were still uncharted. Survivors avoided them after the fires spread through last winter. Too many went in and never came out. Rumors of strange lights at night. Whispers. Disappearances. We've only mapped about a mile past the ridge, Lennox admitted. Beyond that, nothing but static. I want to go, Mason said. If something out there hijacked your broadcast, it's not going to stop. It knows we're listening. Lennox eyed him. You've survived this long. I'd hate to see you get killed chasing phantoms. I've already been hunted. I'm not running anymore. After a long silence, Lennox relented. Fine. But you don't go alone. They left at first light, Mason, Nora, and a tracker named Ren. Ren was young, maybe 20, but moved like he'd been walking battlefields since birth. He spoke in clipped phrases, used hand signals more than words, and carried a scoped bolt-action rifle strapped across his back. Silent, but sharp. The woods thickened quickly. What started as burned trees and ash-covered trails turned to overgrowth, mutated vines and twisted bark. A fog drifted low, hugging the soil like smoke from a fire no one remembered starting. Ren paused at a break in the trees. Tracks, he whispered. Mason crouched. The footprints were deep. Not human. Long toes. Drag marks. Whatever it is, Ren said softly, it's not alone. They pressed on. Around midday, they reached a clearing. A transmission tower, collapsed and rusting, lay across the center. Mason's breath caught. Same model as the one at Echo Point, he said. Nora circled it. But this one's wired differently. She pointed at the base. Scavenged power cores. Wires coiled like veins running into the dirt. Someone had retrofitted this thing, not just to transmit, but to amplify. Ren moved to the far side, lifting a piece of tarp. Beneath it lay a control box. A cracked screen displayed looping code and sound levels. A radio mic was still attached. Nora hit play. The voice echoed again. Alive, Gritty 7, help. But then, just for a split second, a new sound bled in. Not part of the original message. A whisper. Something like a breath, or a name. Mason played it back. Slowed it. Adjusted the levels. The whisper became clearer. Listening. Ren stepped back, his hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. That wasn't human. Mason stared at the screen. It's not just a lure. It's a signal trap. It scans for receivers, then mimics patterns it hears. Like bait, Nora said. Worse, Ren added. Like surveillance. A loud snap echoed through the trees. They dropped into cover. Ren raised his rifle, eyes scanning the tree-line. Then they saw them. Two figures stepped into the clearing, slouched and slow, like classic undead. But something was wrong. Their skin was too smooth. Their movements too precise. And embedded in their necks. Wires. Like receivers. They're transmitting, Mason whispered. They're part of the signal net. One of the creatures turned its head, robotic in motion, and paused. Its jaw cracked open wider than humanly possible. A horrible grinding sound came from its mouth. Then, a burst of static. White noise erupted from the control box. The signal tower behind them buzzed, as if trying to restart. The creatures lunged. Ren fired first, clean, sharp shots. One of the things dropped, twitching like a broken puppet. The other moved faster than it should have, sprinting toward Nora. She swung her machete hard. The blade sliced through its chest, but wires, not blood, spilled out. Mason tackled it, slamming it into the control box. Sparks flew. The screen cracked. The whispering stopped. The clearing fell into silence again, except for Mason's heavy breathing. "They're using the dead, like radios," he said. Nora helped him up. "Then who's listening on the other end?" Ren stared at the burning control box. "We follow the wires. Wherever this signal started, it wasn't here." That night, back at Echo Point, Mason stood outside beneath the stars. He thought of the voice. The breathing. The word, listening. Someone, or something, had hijacked the apocalypse. And it wasn't done yet. The next morning, a thick fog rolled over Echo Point, turning the forest into a sea of pale gray. It clung to everything, branches, boots, breath, like the ghosts of the world they'd lost. Inside the operations room, Captain Lennox listened as Mason, Nora, and Ren laid out what they'd discovered: the makeshift transmitter, the undead wired like living antennas, and the static that whispered like it had a mind of its own. "This isn't just scavenger tech," Mason said. "Someone's building a network through the infected. Hijacking dead bodies to carry signals across zones. They're relaying us," Ren added. "Like walking radio towers." Lennox paced slowly. "We always thought the infected were driven by instinct, hunger, noise, movement. But this is programming." She pulled out a worn folder from a locked cabinet. Inside were photos, grainy, faded, stamped confidential, showing corpses with implants, test sites deep in forest labs, and handwritten reports dated nearly a decade before the outbreak. "What is that?" Nora asked. Lennox hesitated, then handed the file to Mason. "Classified documents from before the fall. I got them from a deserter. He said something was being tested in rural labs, experimental tech designed to send thoughts across long distances, brain to brain. Military neural link research." "You're telling me the virus got inside that?" Mason asked. "I'm saying something survived inside it. A signal that didn't die when the world did." A deep chill settled in Mason's gut. "Where's the lab now?" he asked. "Underground. Sealed since day zero. But based on the power draw Ren traced from the transmitter, it's still active. Roughly 20 miles east. Deep in the red zone." Nora didn't hesitate. "We go." "You don't understand," Lennox warned. "That area's not just infested, it's wrong. Survivors call it the Hollow." "What's in the Hollow?" Ren asked. Lennox met his eyes. "People who go and don't come out the same, if they come out at all." By noon, they were moving again, this time with gear, maps, and one objective: reach the hidden lab and cut the signal at the source. The world changed as they moved east. The trees became twisted, bent in directions that defied wind or weight. Shadows moved even when there was no sun. Occasionally, they heard whispers, barely audible, like radio interference flickering just behind their thoughts. Sammy stayed behind at Echo Point. Mason couldn't bear the thought of bringing him closer to whatever was at the heart of this. "I'll come back," he'd promised the boy. "I always do." But deep inside, he feared he was lying. By dusk, they reached a ridge overlooking the Hollow. The valley below was dead quiet. Broken buildings stuck up like tombstones. Strange metal towers, half buried, half built, jutted from the ground like they had grown there. And in the center of it all, barely visible under layers of overgrowth and earth, was a circular concrete hatch. "There," Ren said. "Power lines run into it from all directions." "The lab," Mason confirmed. They descended into the hollow carefully, moving through wreckage and warped trees. At one point, a half-buried transport vehicle groaned beneath their feet, its interior filled with corpses, lined neatly, their skulls split and hollow. "No signs of struggle," Nora said. "Like they were harvested." They reached the hatch just before dark. A keypad blinked to life as they approached. Nora looked at Mason. "Still receiving power." Mason took a breath and reached for the handle. With a hiss of long-decayed seals, the hatch slid open, revealing a rusted ladder descending into darkness. The air that flowed out was dry, and humming. Ren muttered, "I hear it again." So did Mason. The same faint whisper, not in their ears, but in their minds. Closer. They climbed down. The ladder led them into a steel corridor, walls covered in cables and blinking lights. A nearby screen flickered to life as they passed. Welcome to Project Nexus. Old security logs began playing. Glimpses of doctors, soldiers, early test subjects, men and women in chairs, electrodes on their heads, eyes wide with terror. "Stop it," Nora said. "I don't want to see more." But the screens continued. A final log played on the central monitor. Subject 09 reached partial neural sync. Signal stable. Side effects: severe psychosis. Persistent auditory hallucinations. Recommend termination. Signal refused shutdown. Then static. The lights dimmed. A metal door at the end of the corridor creaked open on its own. Beyond it, darkness. And the unmistakable sound of breathing. Not a machine. Not a zombie. Something else. "We're not just dealing with reanimated flesh," Mason whispered. Nora's voice cracked. "Then what are we dealing with?" A voice, smooth, layered, impossible, answered from the darkness. "Welcome back, Mason." Mason froze. The voice from the shadows was calm, inhumanly calm. Not distorted. Not broken by radio static. It sounded like someone standing right in front of them, except it echoed inside his mind. "Welcome back, Mason." Nora stepped in front of him, machete drawn. "That voice, how does it know your name?" I don't know," Mason replied, though the hairs on his neck rose like the voice had reached back through memory and plucked something personal. Ren raised his rifle, sweeping the darkness ahead with his flashlight. The beam lit up the chamber slowly, revealing long-forgotten terminals, data cores, and glass pods fogged over from years of condensation. In the far corner, one pod was open. Its restraints hung loose. A nameplate lay shattered on the floor. All that remained was Subject 09, M.R. Mason stared at it. His hands trembled. "Subject 9, he whispered. Ren moved beside him. "That's you?" "No," Mason said, eyes locked on the nameplate. "It can't be." Nora stepped between them. "You need to tell us everything, now." Mason shook his head, voice uneven. "I don't remember any of this. Nothing before the outbreak. I woke up in a relief zone, like everyone else. I thought I was just a survivor. But this place knows you," Nora said. "And it's been calling you." From the darkness, the voice returned, closer this time, layered with something mechanical underneath. "Mason Reeves. Neural sync, 72% stabilized. Emotional threshold, exceeded. Conscious memory, fractured." Ren took a step back. "It's reciting data like you're still connected to it." Mason backed away from the pod, heart pounding. "If I was part of this, I didn't agree to it. I didn't choose any of this. You were the prototype," the voice whispered. "You were the door." Suddenly, the power surged. Screens across the room flared to life, showing neural maps, data logs, surveillance footage, all of Mason. Past movements. Radio interactions. His escape from the ruins. His entrance into Echo Point. Nora covered her mouth. "It's been tracking you since day one. You were the first to connect," the voice said. "You left the lab. But the link never broke. We learned through you. Grew through you." The lights flickered, and behind the far glass, something began to move. A tall figure, partially covered in synthetic mesh and decaying skin, stepped forward, its skull reinforced by metal. Antennas protruded from its spine. A single red sensor glowed where its left eye had been. Ren raised his rifle. "That's not human." The voice now came from its mouth, but layered, like many voices speaking in unison. "I am what remains. The convergence of minds lost in static. I am the signal." It stepped toward them. Nora swung her machete, useless against the thick armor plating. Ren fired. 2 direct shots hit the creature in the chest, sparks flew, but it kept moving. Mason stumbled back, voice hoarse. How do we shut it down? Behind the main console, a single red switch blinked, flickering between the words. Neural link, active. Override code, unknown. It's connected through a primary uplink, Mason shouted. We need to fry it at the core. Nora grabbed a crowbar from the corner and jammed it beneath the console panel. Sparks flew as she pried it open, revealing wires pulsing with blue light. Which one? She yelled. Mason closed his eyes. For a second, he let the static come in, the same noise that had haunted him for weeks. And inside it, a single strand of thought stood out. Not a command. A choice. He yanked a thick red cable free. The chamber dimmed. The creature screamed, its voices layered into a terrifying digital howl. It staggered backward, sparks flying from its body. Now! Ren yelled. Kill the link! Nora flipped the override breaker. Everything went dark. The screen went blank. The hum stopped. The red glow in the creature's eye flickered out. Silence. Real silence. Then, the backup lights came on, soft and white. The signal was gone. Mason fell to his knees. He couldn't stop shaking. I was part of it, he whispered. This whole time. Nora crouched beside him. You broke it, Mason. Whatever they turned you into, it didn't win. Footsteps echoed. Ren pointed his rifle until Captain Lennox stepped into the chamber with 2 guards. Backup signal detected a surge, she said. Are we clear? Mason looked up, hollow-eyed. The core is dead. But it's not over. Lennox raised an eyebrow. Why? Mason turned toward the shattered pod, toward the ruined monitors and data backups. Because if they did it once, they can do it again. End of Part 7, 795 words. Ready for the explosive final chapter? Shall I continue with Part 8, the last message? The lab burned behind them. Flames crawled along the ruined cables and shattered consoles, consuming the last traces of Project Nexus. The creature, whatever it had once been, lay still in the rubble. Its red eye flickered once more, then faded into darkness. Mason stood at the edge of the scorched corridor, face lit by the glow of the fire. It's done, Nora said quietly. No, Mason whispered. It's only sleeping. Captain Lennox arrived moments later with Echo Point's backup unit. Her face, usually stone-cold, was drawn with worry. Backup scans showed a drop in signal activity across the region, she reported. You killed the primary core. But the broadcast wasn't fully centralized. It was mirrored. Mason closed his eyes. Mirrored means duplicated. That voice, that intelligence, it still exists. Yes, Lennox said. Maybe not active. But alive, somewhere. Ren adjusted the strap on his rifle. So what now? We dig up every half-buried tower from here to the coast? Chase shadows until the last of us are gone? Mason looked at him. No. We send a message. Back at Echo Point, the team reassembled in the main comms bay. The techs had spent the last 6 hours scrubbing corrupted signals, rerouting clean frequencies, and reinforcing encryption. Nora paced as the system rebooted, while Mason sat before the console, staring into the screen like it held the truth of everything. What are you going to say? Nora asked him. Mason thought for a long time. Then he leaned toward the mic and pressed the record button. This is Mason Reeves, survivor of Sector 4, transmitting from Echo Point. If you can hear this, you're not alone. We've discovered that the dead have been used as conduits. Walking antennas for a neural network built before the fall, rebuilt in the chaos after it. The voice on the radio, it wasn't a survivor. It was a system. A mind. I was part of it. A fragment. A test subject they never meant to release. But I broke the link. For now. To anyone out there, if you hear voices in the static, do not follow them. Do not trust the message. Trust yourselves. Trust the living. And if you can, find us. Echo Point is real. Safe. Armed. We're not just surviving anymore. We're fighting back. He released the button. Silence hung in the air. Ren gave a single nod. Good enough for me. Send it, Nora said. The tech hit transmit. The message shot into the airwaves, bouncing off silent towers and broken satellites, an ember of truth in a world still choking on lies. Over the following days, survivors started to arrive. Not many. Just a handful at first, drawn by the clear signal, the promise of safety, of something that felt like hope. A man with a torn backpack from the northern tunnels. A woman carrying her sister on a makeshift stretcher. A teenager who hadn't spoken in weeks until he heard Mason's voice on the radio. One night, Sammy stood beside Mason on the lookout platform as the wind blew across the hills. Is the bad voice gone now? The boy asked. Mason didn't answer right away. He looked at the stars above, faint and cold through the polluted sky, and then back at the forest. Not gone, he said finally. Just quiet. Sammy looked up. Do you think it'll come back? Mason crouched beside him and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. If it does, he said, we'll be ready. Weeks passed. The signal from Echo Point spread. A network began to grow, not of machines or whispers, but of people. Survivors turned scouts. Refugees became guards. Engineers rebuilt towers, not to deceive, but to connect. And all the while, Mason kept listening. Every night, he sat by the radio, headphones on, volume low, scanning the static. One night, just past midnight, he heard it again. Not the old voice. Not a whisper. But something new. A child's voice. Echo Point. I heard you. I'm coming. I'm not alone. Mason smiled. Not everything that comes from the static is evil. Sometimes, it's a light trying to find its way home. End of Part 8, 795 words. The end of the last message, a signal from deep inside the apocalypse, Zombies audiobook.